another edition of Everybody Somebody. My name is Will Robertson, and I'll be your host. Today, we have an author. His name is Craig Wiggins, and he wrote the book, A Living Witness. And today, I'm just going to let him talk about his book. How you doing, Craig? Welcome.
Thank you. Thank you for having me here.
Okay, so what the book is all about?
Well, the book is basically about my journey from that time period from September 2001 until December 2001. Um, at that time, I was 20 years old and I left school. I was attending Long Island University, Brooklyn
Mm-hmm.
campus, actually. And after 9/11 happened, the September 11 attacks, of course, happened at that time. I was in church, and after the service was over, a minister, she was a minister, one of the titles that she has, but at that time, she spoke to me in the church when the service was over, and she told me God wants me to write about my life.
Mm-hmm.
And at that time, also, I was dealing with a lot of abuse. Um, I had a volatile, verbally, emotionally, physically abusive uncle. And
What was the abuse? Where did that come from? Where did that stem
it
from?
stemmed from when I was little, like childhood
Mm-hmm.
things that happened to me as a kid. Um,
Things
one
like what?
like being molested at a young age,
Mm-hmm.
um, sexually violated,
Okay.
and the physical abuse I endured as a child and growing up. It really traumatized me in a profound way. And there were a lot of things that were going on in my life. And I grew up in church, so my grandmother, my late grandmother, who's no longer here, she introduced me to that spirituality. And it was something about just God and just dealing with I was dealing with at that time that drew me closer. Um, People have this tendency to think I'm religious, but there's a difference between religion and spirituality. I consider myself spiritual.
What's the difference between religion and spirituality?
Well,
Just to make that clear.
religion is to me, religion is like man-made. Like
Okay.
you have Baptists, uh, Judaism,
Mm-hmm.
Hinduism,
Catholic.
Catholic,
Yeah.
Protestant, etc. Right?
Right.
Spirituality is your belief in a higher power that is the essence of who you are in the
Okay.
divine creation of of your belief. You know, of
Mm-hmm.
who you look up to.
So
And,
spirituality and being a form of, like you call religion, let's say Catholics or they're
mm,
two different things in your book.
yeah, in my
Okay.
book, because I went to Catholic school.
Uh-huh.
I went to private school and then Catholic school. I graduated from Bishop Lachlan Memorial High School in
Okay. Wow.
1999.
You know something? I'm also a product of Catholic school too. I
Right.
went to St. Teresa's. You know
Yeah.
what I'm saying? I ain't gonna tell you what year, but
Yeah.
yeah, I do. I am product of it. But I understand. I could relate when you were
Mm,
saying because in growing up, Catholic religion was religion.
mm,
But as I got older, I got to understand what spirituality really is. You know what I'm saying?
mm,
And this is just for me. Spirituality has no boundaries.
mm.
You know, like we're talking about Protestants, Judaism, and whatnot. They have certain kinds of, but spirituality just
Yeah.
remind me back in the days with what they call quote unquote the hippies with the free love and
Right.
whatnot.
Right.
That's spirituality.
Yes. And even at that time when I started writing. Actually, it was a journal.
Mm-hmm.
I just started writing down my feelings and emotions because it was a lot that I was dealing with internally, and of course the travesty of the September 11 attacks.
Mm-hmm.
Um, that time period was very difficult for me, and it was something that I had to put on paper because that was my sanctuary. That was like a sacred place for me to write
Okay.
without being judged or feeling awkward.
Okay, so you said being judged. How were you just judged just by your uncle or by
It, it was
others?
it, it was it was I think it was a societal thing. Um, uh,
And
it-
being judged how, you know what I'm saying?
the based on how I act, how I perceive the whole sexuality thing,
Mm.
gay, straight, this, and all this other foolishness, and that was going on, with people's ignorance. And it was also the fact that I was dealing with, as I got older, with racism, dealing with that, with those things. So because in the first book, in the first chapter, I should say,
Mhm.
um, after 9/11 happened, it was just so sad that people are judged on their race, their color, their religion, their sexual orientation, their political beliefs. I mean, it's like you're judged on everything.
Mhm.
And growing up in New York City, the diversity is inevitable.
Okay.
So I was exposed to a lot of different things, bad and good, but
Mhm.
it taught me a lot. It taught me about people and the beauty of people from all walks of life. Um, the book is a universal language for me because it basically tells a story. It's a journey. It's
Mhm.
about finding myself. It was about finding myself and and trying to find the good in people and just learning from what I learned at the time. What was the lesson that they taught me? Um, I have a wonderful quote in the book by Maya Angelou.
Yeah, I was reading that. Someone was hurt before you,
Mhm.
wronged before you, beaten before you, humiliated before you, raped before you, yet someone survived. You know, when I read that quote, as a matter of fact, that was just before the first chapter. When I read that, it put chills, you know what I'm saying? So
Mhm.
that's deep. That's deep. No matter what you go through, what somebody goes through, at the end of the day, they still survive, you know?
Yes. With of course, it was synonymous with Maya Angelou
Mm,
because she was a survivor of rape and and just the trauma that she went through.
mm,
But it was, I think, I know it was the quote that struck me. It spoke to me in a profound way. And me being a lover of literature,
mm,
I read her stories and her poetry. I was influenced by Sonia Sanchez and Nikki Giovanni,
okay.
James Baldwin, genius, Langston Hughes,
Wow.
mostly a lot of in the African American Harlem Renaissance, Zora Neale Hurston,
Mm-hmm.
Ralph Ellison, just so many diverse black writers,
Mm-hmm.
as well as other writers in Africa, Asia, Eastern Europe. But the whole concept of that quote was to get people's attention,
Right.
say which is the essence of what the book
The
is
book
really
is about.
about. Um, I am also a music lover fan,
Okay. Yeah, I
and
noticed there's a couple of places you did explain that music
yeah,
you can relate to certain songs. That I remember
yes,
there's one on Mary J. Blige.
yes,
Yes, and she talking about pain.
yes, and of course, with the tragedy with Aaliyah,
Yeah.
when she died in the plane crash, I remember having a big post of her, and also another woman, um, Phyllis Hyman,
Wow.
um, definitely to me was one of the premier vocalists of all time. And June 30th, this coming Tuesday, will be the 20th anniversary of her passing. Um, I listen to her music a lot uh, because I can relate to some of the things she sing about, dealing with depression. And she was, I don't know if anyone knows this, but she was diagnosed bipolar disorder.
Mm-hmm.
And she was a beautiful, statuesque woman, uh, great singing voice, talented, sophisticated ladies. Came out in March 1981. I'm telling my age.
Wow.
so,
Don't worry.
but just a wonderful talent. And I have a friend of mine who wrote and published a book 8 years ago,
Uh-huh.
um, Strength of a Woman, the Phyllis Hyman story by Jason Michael.
Uh-huh.
He's one of my Facebook friends, and um, his book's been getting a lot of attention. And it's just amazing how he did such a phenomenal job covering her childhood, her beginnings growing up, born in Philadelphia, raised in Pittsburgh,
Mm-hmm.
to all the way to the end of a untimely death.
You know something? That's one book I have to read. You know, Phyllis Hyman is one of my favorite songsters.
Yeah.
Let me tell you something. I used to always go see her at the Blue Note.
Yes.
She used to be at the Blue Note all the time. I mean, and I used to go see her at the Beacon. And okay, and this is what, like you said, she's such a statuesque woman. I used to love to, when I go to the Beacon, to sit on the balcony, just to
Mm,
look at her and
mm,
to see her, you
mm.
just feel her power.
Yes.
And when she sings, and the words that she sings, you could feel the pain
Mm.
that the woman was going through. And that, like you were saying before, is a form of spirituality, which
Yes.
I felt from her. She was, when she did that record, Friends,
Oh,
her
friend.
Friends,
Yeah.
it just put tears in my eyes because when she did that, it's at that particular time, I was involved with a friend,
Mm.
and that just touched me. And that was she was one of the few artists that I really could relate to at
Mm.
the time when I was growing up. So
Right.
I'm telling my age also. But
Yeah.
you understand, but Phyllis Hyman, she was one of my favorites. As a matter
Yeah.
of fact, I had tickets to go see her at the Apollo just
Right.
before she passed, and you know.
Yeah. I what the book it is something that was cathartic for me to write because I wanted to tell a story.
Hmm.
And I actually wrote it for, and I have to be honest with you, I actually wrote it for two uh, groups of people, for men and for the LGBT community.
Hmm.
The reason why I wrote it for men because growing up in church, I did, you had the pastors and deacons and deaconesses, but as I got older, I would see more women and few men.
Hmm.
And as men, you're taught not to show emotion, not to cry, all this other foolishness, ingrained since from the time you're born. And I wanted to dispel that myth because men could cry and worship and honor, praise God, and show their emotions. I mean, their masculinity or their manhood's not being compromised. And it was something that was very important to me to get out on paper.
Hmm.
And another reason why I wrote it, well, of course, for the with the LGBT community, because you have a lot of ignorance and prejudices against um, gay, lesbian, bisexual, transgender people or non-conforming who are taught in church that their sexuality is wrong, that they're inferior in the eyes of God, and they're going to hell and things like that. Unfortunately, I didn't get to see the movie Blackbird
Hmm.
because I think Monique summed it up succinctly, and it was something that was very powerful for that story to be told in such a profound, dynamic way, because too often we're taboo about certain things that we know that exist. Um,
For the
like,
people, excuse me for
mhm,
interrupting, but for the people who don't know what the LGBT stands for, what does it
yeah,
stand for?
lesbian, gay, bisexual, transgender,
Okay.
and even at that time period, um, I was struggling with a lot of issues, sexuality and things like that, I'm not just talking about gay or thing. It's just sexuality as a whole.
Okay.
Um, it, it was it was it was something that I wanted to speak about because so many people are so tense about sex and
It's
sexuality
a taboo.
and taboo, like it's
Right.
and things like that, and especially synonymous with HIV and AIDS, when
Hmm.
at that time it was known as a white gay man's disease, and now um, it it progressed to like in the African American community, in the Black community.
Yeah, I remember I was reading and you mentioned something about
The
the World Gay,
World AIDS Day.
World Gay AIDS Day. Yeah,
Yeah,
that they have over by the they had something over by the State Building in Harlem,
yes,
135th Street. Yeah.
yes,
Hmm.
yes. It was
Okay.
December 1st, 2001, and I remember I was reading the names of the list of the people who passed away, and it was something that was profoundly touching for me
Mm-hmm.
because I knew at a young age what HIV/AIDS was, and at that time when I was growing, it was known as a death sentence, even though that's no longer the case.
Right.
Um, uh, it was something that was very important to me to write those things in my book that I could not express verbally to someone,
Mm-hmm.
um, because it was something that I knew by someone reading my book or
Mm-hmm.
just having a moment like they could relate. I remember that day too, or sharing a story. I wanted the book to I want the book to be comfortable for people to read without feeling like they should be ashamed of sharing
Okay.
telling that story because it's something that's cathartic. I
Mm-hmm.
think it would help someone. I think it would maybe help someone know who God is, that God is
Mm-hmm.
love. The God I serve is awesome, wonderful, omnipotent, superior, paramount, virtuous, vivacious God. All these adjectives to describe who I serve.
And
Um,
I could see that the book also helped you
mm,
come out of who you were
mm,
because in the book I also read that like you said your uncle
mm,
was very abusive and people would look it down and sometimes you even mentioned that sometimes you would consider you wish you were dead
yeah,
but now
yeah,
that's not the person I see in front of me today.
right. I was contemplating uh, um, suicide attempts. I
Mm-hmm.
had one in 1998 while I was in high school, when I was attending high school at the time, and one in 2006 because my grandmother passed away and
Mm-hmm.
we were very close. Um, I was often teased as a kid and being called nasty names and things like that. And it was just something, and I did not even have I didn't have a father growing up. He was barely around. He was one of those, Papa was a Rolling Stone kind of men, you know.
Okay.
So being raised by a single mother, um, who who I just not who I passed away not too long ago. I'm dealing with that grief. I needed that guidance, and to me, she was like my mother and my father,
Mm-hmm.
and I wanted this book to be, which I know it did do that, to open up about things that I held for a long time. It was like it was suffering in silence. I was basically suffering in
Something sounds
silence.
okay.
And when you suffer in silence, that is the worst kind of thing. That is one of the worst kind of things that someone can go through because
Why do you say that?
because the victim feels alone. They feel they can't talk to anyone about their issue. They feel hopeless of their situation
Mm-hmm.
or situations. Um,
The
it
reason why I asked you that question because for a while I did suffer in silence myself.
mm,
I had a couple of deaths that were real close to me, and with the pain was so much, I didn't feel like dealing with it. You know what I'm saying?
mm,
When I said I didn't feel like dealing with it, in different ways, I could say I was killing myself. You understand?
mm,
But like you said, for the grace of God, brought me through it. And you see, when I read that, I think that's another reason why when I read that quote with Mary Angela, people do survive, and I'm a survivor today. You know what I'm saying? And that's another reason for the show because this show, I would like to, I would like the show to reflect that we do recover, we do survive, no matter what issues you're dealing with.
mm,
It might be hard because at one point I couldn't see,
mm,
but something. People have been telling me, and I've heard this a lot, allow us to love you until you get to love yourself.
Mm,
You understand? And I
yeah.
see you mentioned in the book about well, some of the you had some preachers, some pastors, even some friends who loved you
Mm,
until you got to
love
love
myself.
yourself.
Yes.
And the same thing happened here.
Yes. Yeah. And because for a long time I didn't love myself. It was a lot of self-hatred, stemming from a traumatic childhood, and dealing with those abuses, and dealing with a lot of other personal issues in my life. Um, I knew the only thing I could do is just get down on my knees and pray
Mm,
and cry out to God, and and God heard my prayers. I felt love. I felt the Spirit of God just embracing me,
mm,
and helping me get through those things, even with certain situations I thought were insurmountable. Um, a friend of mine, she's a minister. She would pray with me. We would pray together actually, and but she would mostly lead in prayer, and she would say things to me in the spirit, and I was like, wow, um, and even going back with what I said earlier about with LGBT
mm-hmm.
uh, community, where you're going to hell for your sexuality, for being gay or whatever. Um, that is not true, because I seen um, people from all walks of faith in life,
Mm-hmm.
from all backgrounds, regardless of your race, your color, sexual orientation, and beliefs. It's like that's what love is. Love is a universal, beautiful language. It doesn't see this or that, or too short or too big. It's a diverse way of people coming together,
Mm-hmm.
and I wish there was more. I wish it was more like that in the church. I mean, everything is synonymous. What I experience, viewing from my eyes
Mm-hmm.
and write down on paper, like you would not talk about HIV and AIDS in church years ago, maybe 20, 25 years ago.
Mm-hmm.
Now you have HIV testing. So all these taboos that were once swept under the rug is now out in the open, so to speak, and it's an exciting time. So who knew that we would have a black president?
Mm-hmm.
So things have changed, even though some people still have those attitudes, but it's progressing to hopefully get better.
Oh, Bubba, what would you say to the people who who don't go to church or who don't believe in God? You know what I'm saying? How
Mm.
would you?
How would I? Well, I'm a firm believer that everyone is entitled to their
Mm-hmm.
beliefs and opinions. I don't believe in forcing someone or telling someone, you're going to hell, and
Right.
I want to feel right. But I would say, um, uh, get ask questions.
That's where the spirituality comes in.
Yeah, ask questions, because
Okay.
that spirituality will give you the answers in some way or shape or form, whether it's through um, a, a TV program, or you're talking to a friend, family member,
Mm-hmm.
or you saw what they sign or whatever the case may be. Just ask questions. Don't be afraid, because it's a way of you opening up to that kind of knowledge, and just trying to see, maybe I could get, maybe let me see who God is.
Okay. Last question.
Yeah.
Who's Craig Wiggins now?
Craig Wiggins is a man of faith, um, who lives his life on purpose, who tries to do the right thing. I have flaws. Uh, I'm not perfect. I'm
Mm-hmm.
human, just like the next person, and most importantly, who loves God, because God made me and God loves me unconditionally. So that's
Okay.
who Craig Wiggins
Thank
is.
you, Mr. Wiggins, for attendance. Thank you for your knowledge. Thank
Thank
you
you.
for sharing your book with us today.
Thank you for having me.
Okay. Ladies and gentlemen, we've just been listening to Craig Wiggins, the person who wrote the book A Living Witness. I would like to give a special thanks to my directors, my community producers, and everybody who helped me with this show, Everybody Somebody. On March 21st of this year, this show has won an award for the Best Informed Show for being informing. Anyway, I would like to thank everybody who helped me, who helped me get this award. And I also would like to dedicate the show to a very close friend of mine who passed recently. His name is Daniel Garcia. If it wasn't for him, I wouldn't be here today. So I would like to dedicate the show to him and to thank him from everything he has done for me. He saved my life and also gave me another life. Once again, you've been watching Everybody Somebody. My name is Will Robertson, and I am your host. And until next time, peace.